everyone, I'm Liz Hunt.
And I'm Chelsea Poppens.
And this is the Agency Rocket Show, where we talk about the chaos of running a creative agency.
Yeah. And today we're diving into the world of project management. We're going to do a project management series. And to kick it off, project management is the backbone of everything that we do at the agency. And it's the glue that holds everything together. And without it, chaos ensues, deadlines aren't met. So I think it's a good starting point to start at defining what a successful project looks like in our eyes as an agency, but also in what that looks like for the client and their expectations. Liz, from your perspective, what does it look like from the agency side? What does a successful project look like?
Well, what I like to tell our people is that in any project, you have two clients. You have me, and then you have the client. So as the chief creative, every person who is running a creative project, they have to make sure that a project exceeds my expectations or meets my expectations, and then also that a project exceeds/meets a client's expectations as well. So when I think about a project that would be successful, it's hitting that metric. It's exceeding and meeting my expectations and exceeding and meeting a client's expectations. And that's when I think about the creative, right? The creative side of things, the messaging, the design, the campaign, whatever the deliverables are. But then I also think that obviously I'm not just the creative, right? Like I'm also a business owner too. And so I also think about creative, but then I think about customer service and I think about communication and I think about all these other scenarios, all these other like touch points for a client, right? And so I think about the process for what a client goes through whenever they have a project with us. So how often are they being communicated to? Is it too much? Is it too little? Do they feel like they are being led through the process? And things like, how is our budget being managed? And all those different little pieces, I think those also have to be defined in a project to know and understand if it's going to be successful or not. And I think that's how we at DayCloud define success for a project as well.
Mm-hmm. High quality work on time within budget and the clear communication and transparency. Yeah, I would say that has been a huge factor in, especially in like our branding process. Everyone loves our branding process. We get a lot of compliments on their experience when we do these type of projects. And they always say that when we communicate deadlines and they only have 2 rounds of edits and we're very transparent on what they actually get with what their dollar amount is. They just have a much better customer experience with us. I mean, that goes hand in hand into what does it look like on the client side from their perspective. It would probably be success looks like what they asked for, when they asked for it, and ideally a couple pleasant surprises along the way where I don't want to use your word delight the client, but I hate that word, but that's kind of like the best way to say it is we throw a little extra zazz in to help them feel the experience.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about, if you don't want to use the word delight the client, but exceeding their expectations at every turn of the project. I think that's kind of what you're inferring there.
Yep, exceeding expectations. And so now that we have those defined, let's talk about managing the client.
Yes. So I think whenever we talk about managing a project, I think there's 4 different areas that we have to talk about. We have to talk about managing the client. We have to talk about managing the deadline. We talk about managing the team. And then we have to talk about managing our budget. So whenever we manage a project, that's what project management entails, is those 4 areas. So to your point about managing the client, that's a big kind
it's
of
probably
like
the biggest task.
I mean, in some ways, yes, because it's equal parts deadline deadline, it's equal parts scope and budget. You have to manage the budget because the client can at times eat up all your time if you
blow up a project.
Yes. When it comes to a client, you have to manage the relationship and communicate with them and provide great customer service, right? And communicate enough, but not too little. And there's all of these little nuances to managing a client that I think it is vital. And it's also, I think it's one of those things that like not everybody can do it. You know, it's a talent, I would say. There are people who are talented at this.
Yeah. I think females excel at this because it is multitasking. Not to bash any males out there, but I'm a project manager, so I understand this, but it is juggling a lot of different teams and clients and kind of having your finger on the pulse of the company and everything that's going on because you're talking budgets, you're assessing risks, you're doing a lot of different things, and you kind of have to have it all in the back of your mind and prioritize it. And I think the hand holding sometimes with clients, but also internally, that's also an obstacle within project management is not every team member is going to work the same. And some people are going to require a bit more babying than others. And that's just the name of the game.
Yeah. So when it comes to managing clients, I think bigger agencies, they have actual people who are set up for the job, right? They're like account managers or account executives. They are people who their sole job is client relations. But in our agency, we're too small for someone like that. And so
we all delight the clients.
At the end of the day, it's you and me, Chelsea. You and I are in charge of managing those client relationships. And so as the COO and the CEO and also the chief creative and the project manager, we also get to make sure that our clients are communicated to, that they meet their deadlines, that they send us all the right things that they're supposed to be sending us, that they get checklists and that they check off those lists that they are sending, that we need and all those things. And so that's what we get to do with those clients and how we manage them. And so a lot of what we do with them is we've just set up a lot of processes for that specific side of the project management piece, right? So we have protocols in place and we have processes in place where it's like, okay, at this part of the project, this is what we do. We have this meeting and this conversation, and then we talk about this. Okay, we have our sales meeting with the client. In that sales meeting, we talk about this deliverable. We talk about the cost. We talk about this. And then after they sign contracts, then we know always start every single client. It doesn't matter what it is. We always do a discovery meeting.
And then I think it's really important from the business side of things to understand that it's not when you start the project. The whole project management starts long before the actual project managing of the project, because the whole experience, including the sales side of things, is included in this. From if they have a bad sales experience and they kind of just jump into the project, that's probably going to set the tone for the rest of the project. And if they have a good sales experience where everything's transparent, the numbers are there, their deliverables, their scope is all laid out, their expectations are set up for success in the long run. And I think that's what we do well at DayCloud.
Yeah. And I think to that end, one of the things that we are always working on and always making sure that we are trying to get better at all the time is that we are actively working on great communication with the client and leading them through the process and making sure that they know what's going on at all times. They know that what we are working on at all times, because there's been times that I've worked at other agencies, smaller shops, that they'll have a meeting with a client and then they'll go away and leave for weeks on end, and the client will have no idea, like, where's my stuff? What's going on? They won't know anything of what the designer is doing. So that's something that I've actively worked on, putting processes and protocols in place where we, Chelsea, you've done a really good job of, you have a Google sheet where it's like, hey, here's your status doc. And you just drop in whatever projects we're working on and you update the status on those and you share those with the client every week. They can go look and see, hey, this is where we're at on that project. So the client doesn't even have to email and ask. They can just go check the Google sheet.
Even if they don't check the Google sheet, you know that you told them about it.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to email them status updates every week or that kind of thing, that tedious tedious, very inefficient that I've seen others do. Like it takes hours of that inefficient work off your plate, right? You just update a Google sheet, let them know. And then you can use that for housing other types of information for the client. For example, something that you've done that I really loved is if we need to get photos or videos or something from a client, we have the Dropbox link that they can add all of their information into that Google sheet. So it's all housed in one location. And I think that's awesome. All they need is one place. All they need is one link from us, and they have their status updates. They know exactly what we are working on. They have one place to add in their photos and videos. And then what else do we put in that status doc, that Google sheet? Because there's a ton of stuff that you put in there.
Yeah, anything from employee information that we gather for the websites to business information. And for some of our value dealers, we have products and partners, and the list goes on and on, especially for website projects where we're gathering a lot of information. But I think the important piece that a lot of people make the mistake is overcomplicating things. And when you start complicating things, that experience rating takes a tank in the client's mind, and you need to simplify it. They want it easy. They're paying for us to do the work. They're not trying to be as involved, or most of them aren't trying to be as involved. And to simplify the process for them would give like a 5-star rating for most clients.
Yeah, that's a great point. I do think that the more expensive your work, the better the customer service has to be. And I think that's something that other agencies and designers have to consider, is that if you want to charge more for the service that you are offering, then you have to provide better service. And it's not just better creative, it has to be better customer service, and it has to be more communication, or it has to be, any number of other things that is providing a higher value to warrant a higher dollar. That's a great point. And I agree that having something that is so much more simple, it's one location, and I mean, it's not technically free, but we pay for our Gmail emails, right? So it's nearly free. And so we're not paying for an extra platform to house all this content gathering systems and stuff.
And there are paid platforms for those things. It's just, what level are you at and how much money do you want to spend on these types of things? Because yes, this works for us, but it might not work for everybody. And I think the thing that you have to put in your mind is that we are constantly adapting our processes. They're never locked in. We're always trying to find ways to be more efficient. We're not settling for who we were 5 years ago, because technology is always advancing. And so we're actively looking at new technology, new platforms that might be able to streamline this process for us and make our clients' lives much easier and increase that value add at the end of the day. And I mean, that's also dependent on the type of budgets and the type of projects and the clients that you have coming in.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because so much of what you and I talk about when it comes to good client service is what is the most convenient for the client. Even things as simple, and we've talked about this, things as simple as when you're emailing the client about their website, always sending them the link with their username and password when it's in the demo stages, right? Always just sending that. And it's something that's so simple, but it's just for convenience. Hey, can you take a look at the about page? We've updated the history on there for you. For ease of reference, link and username and password.
Don't make them search for it.
Yes, don't make them search back in your old emails for when you sent it to them the one time, the first time. Just little things like that. That's how you manage your clients and manage the project that you are working with them well. And those are things that we are constantly trying to do. To your point, Chelsea, constantly trying to make it a better process for them, make it a better service for our clients, and always thinking about how do we provide a better service for our customers.
Yeah. Go us. A little high five there. Woo! A little hyped. I think that takes us into the deadline side of things and how those are so crucial and setting that project up for success. And we've learned the hard way that working backward to build up the full timeline is a game changer. And Liz, you speak to this really well as far as some of the examples of things that we've had to do as far as working backward from the deadline, incorporating time for their edits, and communicating clearly that if they miss their deadline, they know know what the consequences are, like that the timeline is an estimated timeline and it will probably get pushed back depending on how long it takes them to get things or to meet with us. If it's in the summer and they have a million vacations, that's obviously going to push the deadline back.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite things. This sounds terrible, but it is one of my favorite things to do and say to a client.
Me too.
If they have a super, super strict deadline, that's great, but that means all of the milestones leading up to your super strict deadline, like, hey, client, you have to meet your milestones just as much as we have to meet ours.
I love a good pushback.
Well, and that's the thing. So what we like to do when it comes to managing clients and deadlines, their deadlines, is we say, okay, your deadline is the end of June. Okay. So that means that June 1, we have a milestone, May 15, we have a milestone, and May 1, we have a milestone, right? So client, on May 1, we're going to hit that milestone. We will give you 1 week to get us your final edits so that we can have our next week to get the return, the updated stuff, and have our next milestone by May 15. If you don't get us all of your final edits within 1 week, all of our deadlines, everything gets pushed back by however many days that you take extra. So that means our deadline, the end of June deadline, gets pushed back. And so we communicate that to the client ahead of time from the beginning. And that's the thing is, like, I've found that if you don't say that in the beginning, then it feels like you're making excuses when you don't hit the end deadline. So you have to say it up front, because then one, it makes you sound like you're professional and you're an expert and you know what you're doing and you've done this before. And then two, I know.
It sounds like you know how to set boundaries in general relationships as an adult.
Yes, but it also makes it sound like you have managed a project before, which we have. We know how this goes.
Liz, you do a great job of setting the tone early that we are the experts and that's why they're hiring us. But also, I think you do a great job of pushing back when it's necessary, even if it seems like a simple, like you just don't want to say yes to everything, because that sometimes gives the client the illusion that they can walk all over you and they can do what they want and they're in charge, they're paying the bills, they're doing this. But you do a great job of, in that discovery and from the initial sales meeting, from the very beginning, setting the tone that, like, this is how we do it. These are our meetings for this project and this is our process. And that's why you're hiring us, because you want an easier process and you want a good experience and you want to end up with a high quality project. And so you do a fantastic job of, like, I could let this slide, but I'm going to push back on this one.
Thank you, Chelsea. That's very kind. And one of the things that you have to learn as you grow into this role, especially, and that you and I have learned, is when to push back and when to pick your battles. There are some things that you should just be like, you know what? It doesn't matter. This tiny little thing that they're asking for, who cares? And then there are other times when it's like, hey, we do need to put our foot down on this. It is worth us pushing back. And again, kindly, and setting boundaries and being firm, but also doing it kindly.
But you also don't have to, like, scope creep is a real thing and it can set a project up for disaster. And if you are a freelancer or a creative or anybody trying to figure out how to say no to people, it's okay to set those boundaries. It's okay to say no. And it's okay to say, this is out of scope and I'm going to have to get you a quote or an estimate for how much time out of scope this is going to be. And that is so vital for being in our agency, because there's so many times that we get, we get clients with ideas. They might be good ideas, they might be bad ideas, but either way, sometimes they're going to explode the project from the defined boundaries of what we've set for it. And we have to push back. We have to kind of draw the line of what that looks like for us. Because we have bills to pay too. We have internal team people that we have to pay, people whose livelihood is counting on the work that they're doing for our agency.
And we're not running a charity. This is not a charity. We are running a business. We're
not a nonprofit.
No, we are a for-profit business. We are trying to make money here, everybody. Like, Make no qualms about it. We are trying to make money. And that, what you're saying, is all about managing your client. And one of the best ways that we learned on how to mitigate the scope creep is by saying this kind of stuff, communicating it up front. Before you ever get to the issue, you talk about it up front. So you say, hey, you get 2 rounds of edits. If it gets to the 3rd, then I'll send you an estimate for the 3rd round of edits. Hey, if you don't hit your deadline that I give you, it's going to push our deadline for the entire project. It will push it back, just so you know. So you communicate all the things that you could possibly do that could honestly piss off a client. You communicate those things up front so that when it does happen, they're not surprised. Because I've learned a lot of times, if something surprises a client, that's when they're going to get pissed. That's when they're going to be angry about you and feel like the project is not going well and they are going to be upset, right? It's not going to be a good project for the client. So when they're surprised and taken off guard, keeping that from happening is what you want to try to do, is keep them from being surprised. And so if you can anticipate those things, which you can, because we've done this enough times, like, you know what's going to happen. You know they're going to scope creep. You know they're going to try to do too many rounds of edits. You know they're going to not hit their deadlines. You know they're not going to send you all the content, because they never do. All these things. Every client does this, right? And so
as a project manager, you have to see the future. You have to be prophetic in these projects.
I mean, exactly. The thing is like, every client does it. Every project does it. Every project goes past their deadline. Every client does not give you the stuff that they're supposed to give you. It's every time, and nothing ever goes on time. So it's just one of those things where if you just communicate that upfront to the client, then they won't be surprised when it happens, and then they won't be ticked off because you told them ahead of time. And so then you can help manage their expectations. And that's really what managing the client is all about. If you can manage their expectations, if you can help them understand, okay, here's reality, here's what you should expect out of this project, here's what you should expect from our team, then that is actually going to help make the entire thing super, super smooth, because that's what managing your client is actually all about. Just managing their expectations.
I say this all the time, and I truly believe it at heart, is that communication is so vital in every part of your life, whether that's business or personal or whatever. And not everybody knows how to communicate. One of the best phrases my dad has ever said to me that it kind of stuck is, common sense ain't so common, and communication ain't so common. And if you assume that they know what you're talking about, or they assume the process or these unknown variables, you're wrong. Don't assume, over communicate at the end of the day, because communication is key.
Yes. That's so true.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our series. We're going to cut this at managing our client. But up next, I believe we have how to manage your team in our next series. And so there you have it. Managing clients and client deadlines as a pro, as an agency. Look forward to having you guys on the podcast this next series. And if you like us, like, share, follow, give us a like on social media, follow us on social media, or shoot us an email if you have any feedback. Thanks for joining.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, bye, bye.